Find a future that you think is absolutely inevitable. And the further you can get yourself down the road to that inevitable future as a company, the more value you're going to unlock. And that is absolutely Jet Zero to a T. It's blended wing body. It's absolutely inevitable. You're not going to beat physics. And that's what this plane's going to do.
Welcome everybody. It's been a long time coming. Just a little bit of background of why we're here today and what we're doing. 2 years ago, I was on a hike actually with Mr. Richard Branson out of in Necker Island. And we had this whole conversation about space and saving the world and curiosity and all these different topics. And out of that was born the Grit Rising podcast. And what it really did for me was it allowed me to explore a curiosity with entrepreneurs that showed grit. And I can't think of any more way to show grit than doing what Jet Zero is doing today. So I'm excited to have Tom here with me. And we're gonna spend the next half hour going through. This will be the first live podcast we've ever done for Grit Rising. Entrepreneur Magazine's our sponsor, so thanks to Entrepreneur, but let's get into it. Why in 2025 do you think you can take on two of the biggest companies in the world and it's gonna work?
Well, I mean, fortune favors the bold, right? But that's not really the full story. The full story about Jet Zero is that we're solving a problem that really Boeing and Airbus aren't well positioned to solve, right? They're not in the business of taking big risks, of betting everything in their company. They have great big order banks and great big employee bases, and they're risk averse, and that's okay, because what startups have done traditionally is we find a lot of people with grit and we go after a problem. And it turns out there's a lot of problems that exist in the industry today that are ripe for solving, and we have the technology to solve it. It just takes people who are ready to get after it, that's all. Right? So it's actually just about global benefit. It's not really about disruption in the sense of like challenging one or another company.
Yeah, there's some good case studies around complacency in companies that are so successful that they stop innovating, and it so often takes somebody from the outside to come in and nudge it, and it's fun to see what you guys are doing. If we're sitting here in 5 years or 10 years really, and you guys are a success, what are the three biggest things that change about flying?
Well, I think when Jet Zero is successful, I think what people are going to see is that we're removing the impediments to growth. I mean, fundamentally, there's a cognitive dissonance in the market today where the industry believes that it's going to double by 2050, almost by divine right. Like there's a 4% compound annual growth rate that just happens year over year, and at the same time, we're going to decarbonize, right? But where's the technology that makes that happen? And so the difference between the reality of how fast you can make that happen and the growth rate that you want, that's where Jet Zero comes in. And we're literally going to unlock trillions of dollars in economic opportunity, not just for us. We're not doing this. People aren't here for the money. People are here for the mission. They're here to reshape aviation. That's a great big vision and mission. And it's going to unlock opportunity for everyone, because what changes, go back to your point, I don't want to get too far from your three things. So there are three things, right? Three things. The first thing is, if you ask the FAA what the impediments to growth are, they're going to say it's everything that happens for the community around the airport. It's noise, it's particulates, and it's NOx, right? If you go to the airlines and say, what are the impediments to growth? They're going to say it's my fuel cost, right? It's going to be the cost of carbon. It's going to be infrastructure. How do I put more people through the same gates? And if you go to the customer and you say, what's the impediment to you flying more, right? That's growth. They're going to say, well, you need to make sure that the ticket prices stay the same or maybe even come down. And it'd be awful nice if I had a more comfortable seat and I didn't feel jammed in. So those are three things. all of those things change when we unleash this new technology. So that's something that, all three of those impediments, those massive impediments to growth that the airlines feel and that the customers feel and that the FAA would tell you about communities, all that gets solved with this technology. I think that's a future that everybody would like to see.
Yeah, I think it'd be tough to not get excited about that.
Yeah.
We hear so often these great ideas, Shark Tank at a very micro level, but then hearing all the time about different business ideas.
Right.
And they're only as good as you can execute them. Tell us a little bit about you as a CEO and how you're going to get this plane to take off and land.
Well, I like that you said execution, because execution is key. I mean, when you're solving all those problems at a market level, you really have to just understand that there's no market risk for a plane that can do all those things. It's really about execution. People say, well, okay, you want to certify an aircraft. That sounds like a very difficult process. Well, it is just that. It's a process. So it's about execution. So fundamental thing you do as a CEO, my first job was actually as a fourth grade teacher, which is great. That's actually the best training. I was a teacher and a coach. It's the best training to be a CEO you could possibly ask for, to be a 23-year-old and communicate to people a complex thing about the world at a fourth grade level. That's just great. And to be a coach, right? You want to get people motivated. You want them to go out and take on big things and try to win. So execution, I learned a lot about that early on in my career. But yeah, certification of an aircraft, it's a process. It's just about one step at a time.
I'm going to challenge you a second here.
Sure.
You just said a fourth grade PE teacher is going to take on the two biggest in the world. Tell me a little bit about.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, sometimes the truth about life is counterintuitive, and that's just one of them. It's like, sometimes it takes an alternative viewpoint to see. It's like when I ran into Mark Page and Mark told me that he had this aircraft. I don't know, maybe a traditional CEO would have looked at Mark and said, oh, that's nice. That's a nice dream. Have fun with that. But from an alternative viewpoint, I looked at Mark and I said, Mark, I had been working on Tesla. So I worked at Tesla when Tesla was the same size as Jet Zero is now. So imagine now Tesla is the best-selling car in the world. Imagine what that would do to your belief and confidence in the power of innovation. And then I worked on an electric aircraft company where I hired Mark to design the aircraft. And then he told me about this other aircraft that he had designed that was in the core of the market and that had 30% aerodynamic efficiency benefit and could deliver even more of a percent benefit on a fuel burn basis. And I said, Mark, this is it. What you have here is the future of air travel. This is the great unlock for market growth, for all the problems that I just mentioned. I honestly don't know maybe that is the secret sauce, is maybe it takes a fourth grade teacher to see the genius of that, as opposed to somebody who's so wrapped up in their day-to-day managing a 120,000 person organization with all that pressure, to really be able to give Mark the time to say, no, let me tell you all about it.
Well, I think that's you just touched on something that's so unique. You have innovators that are always so fascinating to listen to, and then you have that execution. Being around an innovator like a Mark or an innovator like an Elon, what's probably the two biggest lessons you've learned about the way they think and taking that into building a company out of it?
I mean, Elon's so fun. It's so funny because a lot of people look at Elon and go, oh, I just don't understand him. It's like, he told you who he is. He went on Saturday Night Live and said, I've got Asperger's, I'm different. And they're like, oh, it's a mystery. It's so basic. And working for him is maybe a lot like what you would expect, right? People think that he doesn't want to be disagreed with, but he does. He wants to be challenged, right? He wants to be challenged because he knows that's how he sharpens the saw and he becomes more effective. That was my experience. I had that experience with him. And I didn't work with him that much, but when I worked with him, it was profound for that reason. You knew it was high stakes, You knew he was going to be demanding, but he also wanted you to be demanding. So it forces you to raise your bar. But the more important thing I think you learn, and Tim Berry, who works for our team, worked with him at SpaceX on additive manufacturing and had to convince him. At first he said, nah, that's nonsense. We're not going to do 3D printing. And he had to convince him. So he responds to that challenge. But the thing that I think you learn really quick is that he is fundamentally believes in the power of disruption based on first principles physics. So you have to be able to make a first principle physics argument to get where you're going. And he boils that down very simply. You've heard him say it. I can remember the TED talk. It was just like this. It was fireside chat, How do you do this? How do you do these great unlocks? You're running these incredible companies from Tesla and SpaceX and the Boring Company and Neuralink and now X. How do you do this? And he goes, you think about first principle physics, you don't reason by analogy, but I think the most important thing, and it's what we do here at Jet Zero, is he says, find a future that you think is absolutely inevitable. And the further you can get yourself down the road to that inevitable future as a company, the more value you're going to unlock. And that is absolutely Jet Zero to a T. It's blended wing body. It's absolutely inevitable. You're not going to beat physics. And that's what this plane's going to do.
I love everything about the plane, but when you open LinkedIn or the paper, everything's about speed right now. It's about boom and supersonic and the next Concorde. Because that's sexy. It's like F1, right?
Yeah.
And you're building the Escalator. I'm not sure what to call it. The equivalent.
I'll call it more yacht, less
more
sub.
yacht. More yacht, less sub.
Yeah.
I like that. I'd rather be on a yacht than a sub.
Yeah. And so if you've got a yacht, do you want to get off that, or do you want to ride around on it? So I'm not saying I think Boom is fantastic. I love that they did a test flight. That's our next big deliverable. Is to do a test flight of a full scale aircraft. That's what we're working with the Air Force and NASA and other partners to accomplish. I love that Boom just did a test flight of the first commercial company to do a supersonic, maybe ever, or since Concorde, of course. So I think that's great. Some people want speed, but I think other people say, hey, if I've got a yacht-like experience, I just want to chill on my transcontinental flight. I want to have some time with my laptop, maybe watch a movie. That's great. And so providing that better experience that you can get in our aircraft, this design, the shape changes more than just the aerodynamics. It also changes your ability to create a really spacious, accommodating passenger experience. And that's fantastic. People love that. So why do you need to get there faster? Yeah. Have some you time. That's what you need.
The yacht, huh? From
go.
an investment side, you got crypto, you got quantum computing, you got chips and all that stuff. Most people can't explain, but they're throwing money in. What I like about this sector right now is most people can still understand what they're investing in versus some of those things. NFTs have done really well, as you know. But there's something sexy about an established industry that's enticing, that's being so innovative. When you think about the sectors of investing as you look at it, coming from a Tesla, seeing what Tim did at SpaceX, why do you think a Jet Zero or this industry is more attractive today?
Well, first of all, I love what you said about how people can invest in things maybe they don't understand. Virtually every investor's been on a commercial flight. And people would love for that experience to be better, more comfortable, cheaper, have less of a footprint on the world. So I think any investor can understand that. Maybe what's not understood or what we like to demystify when they come here is, number one, how are we gonna build this plane? How are we gonna certify this plane? And I think they're often surprised when they find out that the certification process is not, or that you can take a new plane like this and there's no new rules that need to be written, right? The FAA certification process, they call Part 25. That's a well-defined standard that we fit right within. So we don't need the FAA to go out and write a new rule book in order to certify this new technology. That's massive. That's fantastic.
Here we are in this cold hangar with this beautiful spot. As a company, what do your best days feel like? What happens on those best days as a startup company right now?
I mean, there's tough days, right? There's tough days, and
we're gonna get to that.
Yeah, oh yeah, all right. I don't want to jump the gun. I would say the best days, like honestly, the best feeling this morning. We took a team photo because we had some partners here from NASA and the Air Force. We are a largely hybrid group. We started the company during COVID, so we're 100% remote. We weren't 2 years into the company before we had really an office space. And then 3 years in, we took over this great big 300,000 square foot space here at Long Beach Airport. But still, most of our workforce is remote. So then when we have our partners at the Air Force and NASA, Georgia Tech, and all of our supplier partners, the list goes on, Scale Composites, Northrop Grumman, we do our bi-monthly reviews, we draw a lot of people in, and there's a lot of people here. So we did a team photo. Come down right before lunch and everybody did a team photo. I can't remember when we did that. That was a really happy moment. We had to get up on a crane. Somebody had to get up on a crane in the hangar and the picture's awesome. I'll show it to you later. That felt really great to have the team together. Yeah.
So now that other side, like what are the oh shit moments, like where you go home and you question yourself? What are those days like? And then how do you get back to the good ones?
Well, I think the toughest moment for me is like any process, where you're convincing people, selling people on a concept and an idea that you want to grow this coalition of the willing, we call it. Because that's what it is. You need people who are willing to open their mind and start to put their shoulder to the flywheel. You have to work through a lot of no's. There are a lot of no's in any entrepreneurial game. And you got to wake up every morning ready for that. And guess what? Most days you are, and some days you're not. And you find yourself crawling back into bed at the end of the day, feeling beat down like, I wasn't as ready as I should have been. I took too many no's today, or what have you. But you know what they say? It's like you got to take 100 no's before you get a yes when you're doing an entrepreneurial thing. And I don't know what the exact math on that is, but I think it gives you the point. You have your tough days where you take a lot of no's, and that's just part of the thing. What you find when you find people who have grit, who have what it takes to succeed in a business like this. I've been doing startups my entire career. Is, do you wake up the next day and go, yeah, let's do that again? Or do you just go, I can't do that again? And for me, I've never gotten tired of waking up the next day and going, that was yesterday. I'm gonna find a yes today.
Yeah, there's got to be a little bit of fear of failure.
Yeah, exactly.
And two, having 200 people that count on you to keep going.
Well, yeah, and that's only going to grow. I'll give you an example, though, because I've only been in aerospace for about 10 years. And when we first got into it, what we did was so intricate. When we first started the company, I couldn't give the pitch. I'd say, Mark, you'll be doing the talking in this meeting, and when they have questions at the end. And so, 4 years later, and all of Mark's colleagues that he's worked with that have come in, I feel like I got my PhD in aerospace over the last 4 years. Please don't take that to heart. All my aerodynamicists are like, no, you didn't. There's still a lot you don't know, and they're right. But it feels that way because, you're standing on their shoulders and everything that they've done for decades, and that's fantastic.
You've talked about in 2028 having Jet Zero fly over the Olympics as a dream.
Yeah.
Which all of us sitting in that room would love to be a part of that. What's the biggest inhibitor to that happening?
Execution, right? We've designed the plane, right? Is it a final design? No, because when you start to integrate pieces and parts, you spot something, and the team's gonna react to that. But by and large, the answer is pretty simple. We've designed a plane. Now we have to execute on that, right? That's a process of capital, partners, time, schedule. All of those things have to come together. And when you're designing a plane and building it for the first time, that's a huge challenge. And you have to have a safety culture at the same time. You must be ready for the rigor that is required of flying an airplane out in the world. Because that's actually what you're talking about. You're not talking about our first thing is we fly the plane up in Mojave, right? As a very sparsely populated area.
Yeah,
if you ever been.
A couple of rabbits are checking you out.
Yeah, there's some conejos, but no. If we're talking about flying over the Olympics, why wouldn't we? If we have a full-scale demonstrator and a airworthiness certificate that gives us demonstration ability, I absolutely want to do that. So that requires a rigor, and it takes time, and so you really have to find that balance between rigor, safety, and also pushing the envelope.
Yeah, I think when I talk to your team, or what I've seen that I've been so impressed with, and even Tim elaborated it so well, taking like years and months and compressing it to seconds, hours, and days. And so easy for people to come in, put in 8 hours and leave and live their, whatever that life is.
Yeah.
But to compress that time, to take what could take 10 years and compress it into 3 years, you seem to have created a team that's on board. They're like, we're going to do this and we're going to compress that time. How?
Well, one of the most amazing things is this hybrid work environment, because some people don't need to be supervised. They don't need a manager looking over their shoulder, like, get that done. They are mission driven, but it's hard. As a leadership team, you have to be comfortable with the fact that you have this person. They're working on flight controls, and it's not that they're just in another town. They're in another country. Right, and you've got limited resources, and so in some cases you can be single-threaded. Like, we are absolutely reliant on this person to do their job and do it well. But in a remote environment, sometimes people can compress time. They're not at the water cooler, right? They're not getting into office politics. They are just their focus. And I felt that when we started the company in the middle of COVID. And it was just hour after hour of just devouring information as fast as I possibly could. I felt the compression of time. I felt like COVID for Jet Zero, when we started this company, was 2 years, where we got 4 years work done. And we came out of it with some just incredible designs and incredible plans with a very, very small group of people. So I don't know, if I had to boil that down to one thing, trust in find the right people and trust them to do the work. That's not easy to do, No.
In fact, it's one of the hardest things to do, especially when they're not in front of you, can't see it. It's almost counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's a big one. But usually I boil this down to, when I've interviewed people, we have been incredibly fortunate. I wouldn't say lucky, because fortune implies, there's a lot of work that goes into that as well. You create your own fortune. Our team is absolutely incredible. One of the things that I'll ask when interviewing somebody is, what are you going to do on day one without any supervision or instruction? Because That's probably how it's going to be. Like, do you know the job that you'd be doing? And sometimes people say, what would you like me to do? And you say, thanks for coming in. But usually, what we've found, the people who are on our team are the people who, when asked that question, said, basically, their skin is crawling. They're jumping out of their chair. They can't wait to tell you what it is they've done and how they're going to apply it and what they're going to do. And they usually end up by saying, like, oh, you won't need to worry about me, right? And that's the big difference. It's people who are self-motivated and don't need to be, they don't want to fit in. They don't want their desk and their red stapler from Swing Line. They're ready to roll.
Good office reference.
Office space, yeah.
We finished.
AC load letter.
Yeah. We're going to let people get back to some warmth and some food. Every Grit Rising episode ends with, you get to ask me a question. So what do you got for me?
What do I have for you? Well, I know that you're an endurance runner, and I often think about that, because if you asked me a question and said, what's the one thing that you aren't doing enough of that you feel like you should? To me, that would be running. Like this morning, I set my alarm for a certain time. I'm not going to tell you what it is, and I'm like, I'm going to get up and run. When I got up, I was like, no, I got to get to the office. How do you, get yourself through? I mean, some days I'm sure it's easy to run, but how do you get the will to establish the habit in running, or are you just in a euphoric state every time?
No, not. Mine is very mission driven. I am incredibly competitive. I like to win, and generally there's a race on my calendar that I am trying to accomplish something for. Every day I get up and I do the right thing, I'm closer to being successful. Every day that I don't do it, I'm further away. Yeah. So I'd say that, and then having a good crew around me. I have good accountability. Like I've found guys that I know are going to be waiting for me at 5:30 a.m. at the coffee shop, and I'm going to go run with them. And that's special too, just having people to keep you accountable. But for me, it's mission driven. Not a whole lot different than business. I mean, when there's a mission, I actually think when Elon starts talking about, like, we have to save the world, when he goes into that part of his Asperger's, I think that it resonates, because it's not like I'm trying to save the world by trying to win a race, but it's a mission-driven goal. And so if you're just getting up to run, that's one thing. But if you're getting up because you want to run until you lose 15 pounds, or you want to run until you complete a 18-minute 5K, or whatever it is that you want to do, that's different.
I want to ask you one more question. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have wine dinners from time to time, and you invited me to one, and I felt so honored. But I sat next to your friend, and you have a friend who said that he ran 14,000 peaks in one day. And he said that you run steeplechase together. Can you tell me how you came to know this gentleman, this amazing individual?
So I won the national championship, and he was second place. I don't know how to say it other than that.
But then what did you do?
Then he went out and he learned about my business, and then he wrote this entire business plan for free on the marketing and how he would be better at marketing than my current guy. And then at that point, I was like, I have no choice but to hire you. You just gave me something so much better than I've gotten a year from somebody else. And so his name's Josh Sanders. He's got that 14 peaks or 11 peaks is a world record, and he's a doer.
Yeah.
He's a doer, and I guess he liked me because I was faster than him. I don't know.
I was just inspired by his story of basically saying, I wanted Trent on my team, and then I wanted to be on his team, so I made it happen. And it reminded me of, like, how we need to and try to go and recruit people to Jet Zero, and you got a winner on your team, so I was really impressed.
Yeah, I think winning is contagious throughout your team. As you know, we've interacted so much with our teams, and it's contagious, and I'm grateful for everybody being here today. I cannot wait to be at the 2028 Olympics and look up and see the plane.